class. And those of you who attended my class on Thursday, you will remember that we had discussed uh, till chapter 10. So today I will start from uh, chapter 11 of Rajmohan's wife. So let us look at our PowerPoint presentation, the critical analysis of chapter 11. So here, gradually, we are reaching the midpoint of this novel, and the drama is slowly unfolding, and the tension between Matangini and Rajmohan, it reaches the peak. Obviously, Matangini, she has taken a decision, and she has to deal with the consequences of her decision. But um, along with that, we also observe that there is a kind of a complexity in the characters' relationships between, that is, Matangini and Madhav. So the moral decisions taken by these characters, they seem to, reverberate through their personal lives. So that is quite evident as we go along, and they have to operate within this patriarchal society. Chapter 11 opens with the aftermath of Matangini's intervention in the dacoity plot. So her actions, though meant to protect Madhav, they have set off a chain of events that begins to go out of control. So Rajmohan is obviously furious, and his deepening resentment towards his wife is now accompanied by a sense of betrayal. So he was already alienated, uh, but now he understands that his wife has betrayed him. So chapter 11 is a chapter where Bankim Chandra shifts the focus from Rajmohan's anger to the emotional cost that Matangini bears as a result of her moral stance. Now, Matangini becomes isolated because obviously she will not be able to return to her husband's place, and her emotional burden is quite evident. She has to live in this world where women's agency is limited, and it is punishable by both social exclusion and domestic violence. So her actions won't be, they won't be approved of. They won't be approved of, and she has to silently suffer the expectations that are placed upon her. It is portrayed sensitively by the novelist. So she is caught between two forces. She wants to remain true to her moral integrity, but obviously this involves a kind of a fractured relationship with her husband. Now, along with Matangini, we also come to understand Rajmohan better. We know that he is a villainous character, but uh, now we understand the full extent of his villainy, and the reaction that he shows, obviously it is sparked off by anger, but he is jealous, he is possessive, and he is selfish. So all these things sort of combine together, and um, the novelist, in a way, He's portraying the kind of situation in which the women they lived completely subjugated by the men folk during those times. So she Matangini is obviously condemned on moral grounds, but Rajmohan is also his pride is wounded, and he understands that he has no control over his wife's behavior. So the power dynamics that comes into play here. So obviously the future actions, the fates of the individuals, they come to be shaped by this power dynamics. So this chapter is, in this way, it is important. Also, we can see here in this chapter how the novelist, he continues to contrast Matangini's moral clarity with Rajmohan's moral degradation. So as Matangini's character, or as Matangini rises in our estimation, Rajmohan falls. So her courage in the face of Rajmohan's abuse reflects her ongoing internal conflict. From the very beginning, we have seen her as a kind of a character who is a figure of quiet rebellion. And she is a person who endures silently in the face of her husband's cruelty. So she is elevated to the level of a tragic victim or a passive wife. So her strength is obviously, it can be found with the way she is suffering emotionally and of course physically, and the resolution and the courage she shows. uh, Matangini and Madhav, so the two characters, the relationship is again shown here. uh, the novelist does not portray the love in a very romantic way, but the relationship is of course marked by distance, misunderstanding, and the restrictions placed by society. So Madhav is grateful, obviously he is very much grateful for Matangini's intervention, but he is restricted by the social codes, or the way the barriers or restrictions are placed on him. So he cannot go beyond that. So obviously he would not be able to acknowledge her emotional sacrifice. So the problem or the issue of gender inequality is again mentioned here. So this is the remarks on, or our analysis of, the thematic part. If we move on to the stylistic part, uh, the novelist continues to portray the characters, the events with psychological realism. The emotional turmoil within their minds are portrayed, and a sense of foreboding comes in as we understand that Matangini henceforth will have a very difficult time. So the internal conflict comes in here more. So chapter 11, as we see it, it depends the moral and emotional conflict at the heart of the novel. Matangini's internal struggles are magnified by her deteriorating relationship with Rajmohan, while the novelist criticizes in this way through the portrayal of Rajmohan the patriarchal control. Um, so we can say that this chapter lays bare the emotional and psychological cost of standing up for what is right in a society that does not value women's agency. So it does not obviously give importance or show appreciation for women's uh, agency. So Matongini is treated in a cruel way. We can see that very clearly in this chapter. So this is the analysis of chapter 11. Now I'll move on to chapter 12. And here, the novel's tension and themes of moral duty, social consequence, and gender inequality all converge. They come together to create a moment of a reckoning for the characters. Matongini is now obviously she is facing the full extent of her isolation and the consequences of her actions. So here the novelist is going to explore the consequences of individual morality in a rigidly structured society. The emotional, psychological, social ramifications of Matongini's choices, they now come center stage. And there is the boundaries are set between personal morality and societal expectations. So the situation gradually deepens, and Matongini here, as we see when the chapter opens, she is grappling with the fallout of her decision to warn Madhav. Now, obviously, her decision was prompted uh, by a desire to protect him and also Hemangini, her sister, and uphold justice. But now she is placed in a very tough situation. She is now emotionally distanced from Rajmohan, who had not shown her the kind of feelings that were expected from a husband all throughout. But now, obviously, she is no longer welcome there. The emotional disconnection is there. So the fact that she has defied societal norms, and Bankim Chandra here shows what would happen to a woman if she stepped out of her prescribed role or she crossed the boundary that was there. So during these times, it was all the more difficult for women to act in a, according to their own wishes. So the emotional burden is very much there for Matongini. And it becomes slowly critical. The deepening portrayal of Rajmohan's character, his treatment of Matongini, it is marked by cruelty, selfishness, and the novelist comments on the power structures that define relationships between men and women. Rajmohan's inability to empathize with Matongini's moral courage reveals the fragility of his masculinity. So obviously he will not be able to, or he does not understand why she has taken this decision. But it is all about control and domination, which he has lost. And this is something that he cannot uh, obviously accept. So his rejection of Matongini's actions is not merely a personal response, but a reflection of a broader societal attitude towards women's moral agency. So it's not just an individual, but it's the whole mindset of a patriarchal society. So the challenge to the patriarchal norms that Rajmohan represents, Matongini is posing a challenge to the patriarchal norms that were expected or that were imposed on women. So chapter 12 is building up this conflict. Now, if we look at Matungini, she remains steadfast in her belief that she has done the right thing. Her inner strength becomes even more pronounced as she endures Rajmohan's mistreatment without yielding to his demands or emotional manipulation. But here she undergoes silent suffering. It is typical of the situation that many women face under the patriarchal system. So, Bankim Chandra highlights her capacity to resist these systems in a very subtle way, but with inner strength. So, the maintaining of her sense of moral integrity, though she is crushed under the weight of societal judgment, that is quite evident here. So she maintains her inner strength and all the strength of her character. Here in this chapter, chapter 12, that is, we also see a contrast between Matungini's moral courage and the weakness of the men around her. So this was earlier referred to how in this novel it is aptly named Rajmohan's wife. So though the name has not been mentioned, Matungini's name that is, but she is the real heroine, and the men around her, they are uh, significantly, you can say, inferior. So Rajmohan, on the one hand, is unable to understand the consequences of his actions, uh, as it is said that he is a villainous character. Now, Matungini, obviously, she is prompted by kind of sense of ethical responsibility and compassion. On the other hand, Rajmohan is obviously motivated by self-interest, pride, and the desire to maintain control. So he is an ungrateful character who wants to harm his benefactor, Madhav. So this is a juxtaposition, placing side by side, and it is a powerful critique of gendered power dynamics. So the men are often depicted as failing to recognize the depth of women's emotional and moral agency. This comes in again and again in this novel. So the narrative structure, apart from the, you know, thematic, analysis, the narrative structure, if we look at the narrative structure, we will see that Bankim Chandra is once again focusing on emotional and psychological realism. The pace of this chapter is slow because Bankim Chandra is showing the internal struggles of the characters, not so much outward action. There is a kind of a reflective tone to allow the reader to deeply engage with the emotional complexities of the situation, how each character has an emotional depth. Obviously, the readers are given to understand or made to understand the harsh realities of Matungini's situation. A woman who had dared to act against the set social conventions. So there are here in this chapter introspective monologues and emotionally charged dialogues, so we can look at the characters' inner worlds, the minds of these characters, and understand their situations. So, in order to conclude, we can comment on chapter 12 that it is significant in advancing the novel's central themes of gender, power, and moral duty. So it depends the emotional complexity of Matungini's character. It shows her resilience in the face of personal sacrifice. Also, it illustrates the moral degradation of Rajmohan. So we see all these things together. So the chapter serves as a critical turning point as the emotional stakes for Matangini becomes even higher. And the novel's exploration of social consequences, personal agency, and gendered power dynamics, they continues to unfold. So all these themes, they are very much interwoven, and Bankim Chandra continues to emphasize them throughout these chapters, and they are unfolding slowly before the eyes of the readers. So this is chapter 12 of Rajmohan's wife, and now let us move on to the next one, that is chapter 13. It is a climactic chapter which brings together the moral and emotional crisis faced by the novel's central characters. As the consequences of Matangini's decisions continue to unfold, this chapter serves as the turning point where the novel's central themes of sacrifice, social conventions, and female agency reach their peak. The chapter explores not only the final moments of Matangini's defiance, but also the way her actions have irrevocably altered the course of her life and her relationships with those around her. So we can see here these themes of sacrifice, social conventions, uh, female agency, all these things are reaching a kind of a peak. And Matangini's defiance is also visible here, visible in this chapter. And we can understand that her actions have uh, altered or changed the course of her life. This chapter begins with the tension between that was there already between Matangini and Rajmohan. It reaches its peak. Now, Matangini's moral clarity is realized as a source of both strength and tragic isolation. The chapter emphasizes the emotional distance between the two characters, showcasing Rajmohan's increasing rejection of Matangini. He views her actions not through the lens of moral courage, but as an affront to his authority and control. Uh, his anger and jealousy remain palpable, but his response to Matangini's defiance reveals his utter failure to grasp the reasons behind her actions. Now, Rajmohan's inability to understand Matangini's motives underscores the novel's critique of the narrow, patriarchal vision that governs the behavior of men, especially within the confines of marriage. So, here, the marital relationship between Rajmohan and Matangini, it is brought to the fore by the novelist, and the problems arising there from these maladjusted, you know, uh, kind of issues which come up here are quite evident. Now, chapter 13 becomes a moment of emotional reckoning for her. The weight of her sacrifice, the emotional isolation, uh, how she has chosen her moral righteousness over social approval, it becomes fully evident. Uh, Matangini's suffering, it is not portrayed as a mere consequence of her moral clarity. It is an integral part of the narrative that speaks to the societal forces that punish women for stepping outside prescribed roles. Uh, Matangini's internal transformation is visible here in this chapter. The external conflicts are obviously there uh, with Rajmohan, and the broader social pressures are there. Matangini's own personal growth and emotional resilience, they now take center stage. She is facing the external rejection, of course. She emerges as a morally autonomous character, willing to endure personal loss for the sake of doing what she believes is right. So here, the chapter becomes a meditation on the personal cost of integrity. and the strength required to maintain one's moral compass in the face of overwhelming adversity. So it is an extremely tough situation that she is facing. Madhav's limitations, his character, it comes into force. Now, social implications are obviously there. We have seen this, of course. Madhav cannot reciprocate the feelings, and the broader social implications of Matangini's defiance, which are governed by rigid gender roles and expectations. Obviously, Matangini's moral actions are not just a personal rebellion, but a challenge to the foundational structures that define women's role within society. So, this is something that Bankim Chandra brings to the forefront, that she is acting as a representative character, challenging the foundational structures within patriarchal system. So her quiet resistance reflects a larger critique of the oppressive norms that stifle women's autonomy and self-expression. So self-expression and autonomy are stifled cruelly. She is isolated from Rajmohan, but also another thing is highlighted: the limitations of the patriarchal system and the personal toll it takes on those who dare to challenge it. So the personal loss, the kind of disaster that one has to endure, the women characters, the female characters, that is very much evident here. So Bankim Chandra continues to use a reflective, introspective tone, allowing the character's emotional status uh, to unfold gradually. It gradually is unfolding. Internal monologues, exploration of personal suffering enhance the chapter's emotional depth, making it one of the most poignant moments in the novel. Bankim Chandra's portrayal of Matangini's quiet endurance and the slow unraveling of her relationship with Rajmohan is deeply moving, emphasizing the tragedy of her situation and the moral clarity that drives her decision. So here in chapter 13 of this novel, it is a significant chapter. It marks the culmination of Matangini's moral journey. Her sacrifice and the resulting isolation reinforces the novel's themes of female agency, the consequences of defying social norms, and the emotional costs of personal integrity. This chapter underscores the emotional and social complexities of Matangini's character, while also highlighting the broader societal critique embedded within the narrative. So the complexity of Matangini's character is depicted here. The novelist also highlights the broader societal critiques, which obviously it is there all within the narrative style. And the novel's exploration of moral courage, sacrifice, and the limitations of patriarchal system to a powerful and emotional conclusion is, of course, seen. So here, chapter 13 is, um, it can be analyzed in this manner. Um, we will now move on to chapter 14, where the resolution takes place, the moral and emotional conflicts that have been building throughout the novel. A final poignant conclusion is reached, Matangini's choice. So the synthesis of the central themes of the novel, as was mentioned earlier, the sacrifice of Matangini, the gender roles as depicted through Matangini and Madhav and Rajmohan, the societal expectations which are broken by Matangini, and the tragic cost of individual integrity, what Matangini has to suffer as a result. So all these offer a resolution that encapsulates the emotional journey of its main characters. There is a sense of closure as the chapter 14 opens. We have seen how the events have unfolded, and now they are reaching their culmination. Matungini had been emotionally isolated. She had been psychologically burdened throughout this novel. We have seen that right from the first chapter when she went out with Konakmoi to draw water. But now she has reached a kind of a situation. She has to take a final decision, a kind of a crossroads. Her actions have irrevocably altered the course of her life. The emotional and social consequences of her moral clarity are laid bare. So she has to take the decision either to return to Rajmohan's family, rather house, which is absolutely impossible now, or to go somewhere else. So her life has suddenly, within a few days, it has changed utterly. Rajmohan obviously is untouched by her moral clarity or how she had uh, acted out of a sense of uh, doing the right thing. Obviously, he is a selfish character right from the beginning. We can see that. And he is a jealous and morally bankrupt person, as can be seen because of how he plots against his benefactor Madhav Ghosh, who had given him a job and a place to stay in. But he is not grateful for all these, uh, you know, all these things. Instead, uh, he shows his ungratefulness, and he is, in a sense, aggrieved that he has to take all these favors from Madhav. And therefore, the toxic patriarchy of the novel that is portrayed, the male characters, Rajmohan and Mathur Ghosh, they are very much uh, the embodiments of evil forces. About Mathur Ghosh, we will see later, but as of now, we can look at Rajmohan's character, which is obviously right from the beginning. It has all the negative connotations, and then Rajmohan's role in this narrative, the way he is portrayed by the novelist, it serves as a broader commentary on the oppressive structures that govern marital and social dynamics. So this is another thing that we have to keep in mind when we are looking at Rajmohan's character. So Rajmohan is a portrayal of or a representative of the moral, a kind of the oppressive structure that was prevalent in the society. So he stands for that. Chapter 14, if we look at it from a critical standpoint, chapter 14, it will, we will see Matungini is placed at the center of the narrative's moral reckoning. She has been isolated and rejected, but she remains steadfast in her belief that she acted out of moral duty. So her internal conviction is very important. It is to be noted here. So the moral clarity is the foundation of her character. She is facing overwhelming adversity, obviously rejected everywhere. Her sense of right and wrong remains unshaken. So she is not a passive victim as such, but a woman who has made a choice uh, and who has accepted the painful consequences in order to preserve her integrity. So the portrayal of Matangini is crucial in order to understand her character, which is, of course, tragic, but it also exudes quiet heroism. The chapter also reflects uh, on certain limitations of Matangini's moral choices. She, of course, maintains a sense of integrity, but the consequences of her actions have left her alienated from Rajmohan and the society at large. So, the tragic dimensions of her story, of her life, life story, it unfolds now. So, her moral courage, which is quite admirable, but it has come at a great personal cost. She has to endure a lot of suffering. The moral victory and the personal loss, if they are placed side by side, obviously uh, it would form the central dilemma of this novel, the central question. And the question of whether individual integrity is worth the price of social isolation and emotional suffering is also put here. So here, chapter 14, here the novelist is presenting a nuanced view of morality, one that acknowledges the personal sacrifice with the fact that uh, a moral decision would involve personal sacrifice. The shift, of course, is visible. It is there. Matangini's sacrifice cannot be acknowledged fully by Madhav, and it is a kind of a delayed recognition of Matangini's strength and sacrifice. So, as we had seen, Madhav is a good character in this novel, but he is a passive character and he is limited uh, by the traditions or the societal norms. His actions are limited. So he fails to act as a as providing some kind of support to her during the crucial moments of her uh, suffering. So obviously, we can understand the limitations of Madhav's character. Finally, if we look at the prose style, it is introspective and melancholic, the way Bankim Chandra portrays the development of the plot. The reflective tone is, of course, there, but it is underscoring the emotional gravity of the events, and the chapter has a kind of finality. The internal emotional landscapes of the characters, Matungini's character in particular, it enhances the sense of tragic inevitability. And the pacing of the narrative slows down as the novel reaches its conclusion. It allows the readers to fully absorb the impact of the characters' choices and how the consequences have come about according to the choices made by the characters. So the chapter, chapter 14, it serves as the emotional and moral culmination of Rajmohan's wife. It is a chapter that brings together the novel's central themes of courage, sacrifice, social consequences of defying patriarchal expectations. Uh, Matangini's, when she takes this decision and is cast out, rather, she goes out, it is a powerful commentary on the emotional cost of personal integrity. So, it is a resolution, it is which is tragic, obviously, but is deeply human and resonant throughout the novel. The novel's critique of gender roles and is there, and it also highlights the quiet heroism of women who, despite the cost involved because of their decisions, they choose to act in accordance with their moral beliefs. So that is uh, what is emphasized on here. So we have today analyzed 11, 12, 13, and 14, the four chapters. And I would uh, conclude the class today here.